She only wanted a job. Cleaning his ranch, but the lonely Baron watched her kiss her daughter and... The wind cut across the high plains like a restless ghost, rattling the dry branches of scrub oak and whipping the tall grasses into trembling waves. Dust rose in spirals from the dirt road, catching the last threads of the sinking sun and turning the horizon to fire. She rode slowly, a lone figure atop a tired horse, her dress patched and sun-bleached, flapping against the dry breeze, like a fragile banner against the world. In one hand, she gripped the reins. In the other, her daughter's small, trembling fingers, delicate as reeds in the wind. Her eyes, wide and searching, drank in the vastness of the Baron's ranch with a mixture of fear and hope, a cautious wonder that had survived years of hardship. The corral gates came into view, ancient wood scarred by storms and horses' hooves. Dust swirled at their feet, carrying with it the familiar scents of hay, sweat, and old firewood. Somewhere overhead, a hawk circled, wings slicing the amber sky, a silent witness to the scene below. She nudged her horse forward, careful not to stumble on the uneven ground, each step echoing with purpose and trepidation. From the porch of the stone mansion, weathered and imposing, he watched. The Baron's eyes were pools of quiet intensity, shadowed beneath a furrowed brow. Scars etched his cheeks and hands, stories of battles fought long ago, both physical and unseen. He did not move, but his gaze lingered, following her progress with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, not lust, not desire, but an almost forgotten recognition of fragility meeting strength, of resilience that matched his own solitude. The silence of the ranch pressed in, heavy and uncompromising, as though it judged every footfall. She dismounted with care, the horse snorting and pawing at the dust. Her daughter clung to her, small chest rising and falling in nervous rhythm. She lowered herself, bowing slightly, a gesture of respect and humility, and offered her voice. "I can work, clean, cook, whatever you need." Her words were soft, measured, carrying the weight of desperation and pride intertwined. The Baron said nothing, merely tilted his head, studying her. Dust drifted through the porch beams, glinting in the last rays of sunlight. Each step she took, across the wooden floorboards of the porch, made a sound too loud, too honest, echoing in the quiet like a heartbeat. Her daughter's eyes wandered to the corral, to the wide-open plains, taking in the isolation, yet finding some strange comfort in the endless horizon. In the fading light, she knelt to kiss her daughter goodnight. Her lips brushed the child's forehead, a tender, fleeting gesture that seemed to hold every sorrow and every hope of the years they had survived together. The Baron's eyes caught it, a glimmer of a feeling he hadn't dared summon in decades, a quiet warmth, fleeting and fragile, curling like smoke in his chest. A spark ignited, fragile and hesitant, yet undeniable. The wind whispered through the empty corral, rattling the gates and stirring the dry leaves. It spoke of secrets long kept and storms yet to come, carrying the scent of distant rain, of burned wood, of horse sweat. She had survived worse, had outrun men and hunger and fear. But this silent ranch, these shadowed walls, this lonely Baron watching from his porch, felt like a storm she might not outrun, a reckoning she could not avoid. Night fell, the sky a tapestry of bruised purples and amber streaks, stars beginning to prick the heavens. The daughter rested against her shoulder, small and fragile, a heartbeat in the vast silence. And still, he watched, not moving, not speaking, only watching. The quiet of the ranch wrapped around them like a shroud. But somewhere in that silence, in the dust and the wind, a fragile promise began to take shape. One of survival, of connection, of a storm that might yet be weathered together. And as the first fireflies blinked into existence along the fence line, the Baron's gaze lingered on them a moment longer. The chapter closed in stillness, a pregnant pause before the first ripple of destiny had touched them all. The mornings bled slowly into afternoons, each day folding into the next like the worn pages of a ledger left in the sun too long. dust. Motes floated in lazy spirals through the air, disturbed only by the rhythmic swish of brooms, the rasp of brushes on weathered wood, and the soft scuff of her boots across the barn floor. Her daughter laughed once, a sound like a bell breaking a long-held silence, a single crystalline note that seemed too bright for the quiet ranch. The Baron stiffened, his gaze snapping toward the window where the mother and child moved in tandem. A choreographed dance of survival and care. He watched her with quiet intensity, eyes tracing the slope of her shoulders, the gentle arch of her hands as she combed her daughter's tangled hair, the way sunlight caught the edges of her worn dress, turning them to threads of gold and shadow. There was a grace she could not hide, a fleeting elegance forged from hardship and endurance. Not once did he speak. Words were cumbersome, unnecessary. His silence, heavier than any sentence, marked him as both observer and judge. She felt the weight of his gaze, but did not flinch. Years of evading scorn and fear had carved a resilience into her bones. Still, a coil of tension wound itself beneath her ribs, a warning she could not name, a storm whispering of unseen trials. Shadows stretched long across the yard, twisted by the low sun dipping behind mesas that flamed orange and crimson. The horizon trembled under the heat, and dust danced in spirals, caught between earth and sky. A commotion broke the quiet, a horse's hoof clattering against rock. From the neighboring ranch a man emerged, red-faced and reeking of liquor, swaying like a tumbleweed caught in a sudden gust. His gaze lingered too long on her daughter, on her, leering with an entitlement born of ignorance. A woman alone, with a child, he slurred, voice rough as gravel. Shouldn't be roaming this land, shouldn't be thinking she belongs here. The Baron moved without a word, stepping from the shadow of the porch into the open sun, his presence stretched, tall and unyielding, a living barricade between the drunk and the fragile peace of the ranch. The man froze, blinking against the intensity of the Baron's gaze. A storm held in stillness, silence, sharp as a knife, cut between them, and the intruder's words faltered, drowned in the weight of authority and quiet menace. She watched, chest tightening, but did not step closer. This man, this silent, scarred figure, stood for something she had not yet named, something both protective and terrifying. Her daughter clung to her skirt, tiny hands clutching fabric like a lifeline, eyes wide in awe of the unspoken battle. When the neighbor finally retreated, muttering curses that disappeared into the wind, the Baron did not follow. He returned to his shadowed corner, unbroken, unyielding, his silhouette carved against the porch like a statue forged from dusk and resolve. Night fell with a slow sigh, painting the ranch in muted indigos and silver light. She found a scrap of old wood, rough and splintered, and knelt on the porch with her daughter beside her. A pocket knife, dull but dependable, bit into the grain as she carved her daughter's initials. A silent declaration that they were here to stay. A mark that the land now held their story as surely as the wind held the dust. The act was intimate, sacred, a ritual of permanence in a world that had offered little stability. Above them, the first stars pricked the darkening sky, cold and distant, yet luminous enough to cast pale shadows across their faces. The wind carried the scent of sage, of horses, and the faint tang of distant rain. Somewhere, a coyote yipped, a lonely note that mirrored the isolation of the land. Yet amid the vast silence, a strange serenity settled over her shoulders, as if the earth itself recognized her claim. From the window of the Baron's study he watched them. His hands rested against the sill, roughened from years of labor and battles remembered only by skin and scar. His gaze lingered on the mother and child beneath the starry expanse, tracing their forms in the silver glow. In the curve of her shoulder, in the tilt of her daughter's head, he saw a life that could have been his if the world had been kinder, if circumstance had been different. His jaw tightened, a quiet longing etched deep into his rugged face, a yearning unspoken and perhaps unattainable. For the first time, the Baron felt the distance between himself and the warmth of a home he might never claim. He inhaled the night, air dry and sharp, scented with dust, sage, and the faint smoke of the evening fire. The ranch, silent and vast, seemed both protective and isolating, a mirror to his own solitude. The mother and child, unaware of the eyes upon them, leaned into the night, carving permanence from splintered wood and quiet determination. And in that stillness the Baron remained a silent watcher, a shadow with a heart stirred by longing and the promise of something fragile, something worth guarding. The night stretched, vast and patient, holding its breath as if waiting for the next ripple in the lives that had come to inhabit this lonely ranch. The rain came first as a whisper, brushing across the plains with silver fingers, then crescendoed into a hammering fury, striking the tin roofs with relentless insistence. Water ran in rivulets along the corral posts, pooling in muddy channels that reflected the jagged gray sky. Inside the barn, the daughter whimpered, her small body trembling against her mother's chest. Her tears soaked the worn fabric of the woman's blouse, salty and warm, a fragile heartbeat amid the storm's deafening roar. The Baron moved between them and the swinging barn doors, each step deliberate, precise. His hands, scarred from years of work and old battles, gripped the latches and bars with a practiced strength. The lantern flickered in the dark, casting the harsh outlines of his face into light and shadow, revealing eyes that weighed decades of solitude and memory. Every bolt secured, every plank reinforced, was a wordless promise of protection, yet each movement carried the weight of old grief he had long kept buried. Thunder shattered the night like a rifle shot, lightning carving the sky into jagged veins, illuminating the barn in stark, fleeting flashes. The wind tore through the cracks, hurling rain and dust in sheets, rattling the roof as if nature itself demanded confession. The woman, exhausted to the marrow, finally let her story spill forth. She spoke of a husband lost to a cruel twist, of fate, of towns that had betrayed her, of nights where hunger gnawed at her ribs and cold seeped into her bones. Her voice trembled, quiet and intimate, weaving years of sorrow into the rhythm of the storm. The Baron listened, silence heavy and unbroken between each sentence. His presence was a grounding weight, yet fragile as the world they inhabited. When he spoke, it was not to offer comfort, but truth. Decades of land and wealth had never brought him warmth, laughter, or the feel of a child's hand in his own. His voice, rough and low, carried the weight of isolation and longing. "I've had everything," he murmured, "and nothing that mattered." The daughter, sensing something unspoken yet powerful in the air, pressed herself into the Baron's side, small hands resting on his coat. He barely moved, allowing her to curl against him, the three of them forming a triangle of quiet endurance. Shadows danced across the walls, flickering like spirits as the candles swayed and sputtered. The wind howled through the gaps in the barn, a symphony of nature that framed their confessions and silences alike. For a single fleeting moment, the Baron let his hand rest on her shoulder. She flinched at the contact, wary, but did not pull away. There was a fragile understanding between them, a recognition of shared solitude, of battles fought in silence. Her breath mingled with his, small and steady, echoing a rhythm neither had known in years, a pulse of trust and vulnerability born amid the storm. Lightning struck again, illuminating the rough planks and the dust suspended in the humid air. Rain poured against the roof in relentless torrents, yet inside the world contracted to three figures: a mother, a daughter, and a man whose heart had been locked for decades. They were bound not by blood, but by necessity and the quiet ache of human connection. Each shiver, each flinch, was mirrored in the others. Tremors of vulnerability shared like a secret language only the heart could speak. The storm gradually softened, rain slowing to a steady patter. The barn smelled of wet wood and dust, the scent raw and earthy, tinged with the faint smokiness of the lantern. Outside, the plains glistened under the residual rain, vast and waiting, the mesas solemn witnesses to the small domestic tableau within. There was a sense of renewal in the air, subtle and unspoken, like the moment after lightning fades, leaving only the trembling quiet that heralds change. The three of them remained in that fragile silence, huddled together in the dim glow, hearts beating in uneven sync. The daughter's eyelids drooped, heavy with exhaustion. The mother's hands trembled slightly as she held her close. The Baron's eyes softened, dark pools reflecting the flickering candlelight. Each understood the other without words. A truce, forged from shared suffering, endurance, and nascent trust. As the storm ebbed completely, the barn grew still. The only sound was the occasional drip of water from the roof, a metronome marking the slow passage of night. The chapter closed on the three figures, a quiet tableau of fragile humanity, their shadows stretched across the floor in flickering light. They were survivors, wary but alive, bound together in unspoken solidarity, hearts trembling in unison, like the last shiver of lightning across a quiet sky. Dawn broke over the plains like a blade of gold slicing through lingering shadows. The horizon burned amber, and dust curled from the dry earth, spiraling in lazy columns as if the land itself sensed the coming danger. A rider appeared on the ridge, lone and deliberate, the leather of his coat slick with dew. The horse beneath him pawed at the earth, hooves clattering against stones as if heralding the storm of trouble he carried. He was a messenger from the Baron's past, a shadow of debts unpaid, threats whispered, vengeance unfinished. Inside the kitchen, she pressed her hands to the sill, knuckles white, heart hammering against her ribs like a frantic drum. The daughter, sensing the shift, clung to her side, eyes wide and shimmering with apprehension. The woman's gaze followed the rider as he neared the porch, instincts sharp, tension coiling in her chest like a spring wound too tight. The Baron appeared behind her, emerging from the shadows of the hall with the slow, deliberate motion of a predator sizing its prey. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing into darkened pools of resolve. Every muscle in his body was a line drawn in silent defiance. He did not speak. He did not need to. Presence alone was a barricade, a wall against intrusion. The rider dismounted, boots scuffing the porch, voice carrying across the crisp morning air. Words were sharp as bullets, mocking and taunting, meant to provoke fear. "Thought you could hide here, Baron," the man sneered. "Thought the years could wash away debts owed, and the blood still unaccounted for." The Baron's silence answered, a storm waiting to erupt. Dust swirled between them, catching the sun, painting halos of tension around the three figures. She wanted to shield her daughter, to curl behind the Baron like a protective instinct, yet something deeper stirred, a spark of courage, of survival ingrained from years of evading cruelty. Her fingers itched at the edge of the porch, ready to act if necessary, the same fire that had carried her through hunger and fear igniting again. The daughter laughed suddenly, a pure, untarnished sound, the fragile innocence of life refusing to bow to threats. The rider froze mid-step, a pause in his arrogance, eyes haunted by the fleeting beauty untouched by cruelty. For a heartbeat, the morning held its breath, suspended between menace and grace. The clash came swift and unrelenting. Dust exploded as fists met flesh, as boots scraped wood and earth alike. The rider swung at the Baron, underestimated strength meeting measured precision. The Baron did not strike recklessly, but with intent, using every scar and lesson etched into him by years of battle. The woman watched, heart in her throat, yet she did not flinch. Eyes sharp, breath held, ready to intervene if fate demanded. The intruder fell back, driven off by a combination of brute force and unwavering resolve. He limped, cursing and spitting, leaving a final warning that echoed across the plains like the cry of a distant hawk. The wind carried the threat into the horizon, dust settling slowly, the echo of conflict lingering in the golden air. When the sea dust cleared, silence returned with a weight heavier than before. The Baron and the woman stepped side by side onto the porch, the first rays of sunlight gilding their faces with soft fire. The daughter nestled between them, tiny and trembling, yet shielded by the unspoken alliance that had formed in the heart of confrontation. Their eyes met for the first time since the storm of words and fists, and the unspoken bond solidified. Words were unnecessary. Hearts beat in silent sync, a rhythm of trust and shared endurance that could not be undone by threats or trespassers. The wind whispered through the corral, carrying with it the scent of dust, rain-soaked earth, and the promise of survival. The Baron's hand, rough and calloused, hovered near the woman's without touching, a silent acknowledgement of what had passed and what might yet grow. She allowed herself a small exhale, the first sign of relief since dawn, and the daughter laughed again, the sound ringing like a bell of innocence over the plains. The chapter closed on this tableau, 3 figures, bound not by words but by unyielding, strength and courage, standing together against the rising sun. The ranch, scarred yet steadfast, held its breath with them, as if the plains themselves understood the fragile promise of protection, loyalty, and the quiet beginnings of trust. The days stretched like endless highways of dust and sun, and with each one, the tension between them grew, slow and relentless, like wildfire creeping through dry brush. She could no longer ignore the Baron's gaze, lingering too long in quiet observation, tracing her movements, as if mapping her very essence. The small kindnesses he offered, coffee set beside her hands, blankets folded with care, protective gestures delivered without expectation, stirred something fragile and forbidden in her chest. Every glance, every fleeting touch of hand to shoulder, ignited a yearning neither dared name, a spark threatening to consume them both if left unchecked. They worked together in silence, moving through the ranch as if choreographed by instinct. Fences mended under hands roughened by labor. Livestock tended with steady patience, and the sun beat down on their shoulders with merciless heat. Wind whipped through the dusty yard, lifting strands of hair, swirling loose hay, and carrying the scent of sage and earth. Their daughter ran between them, laughing, oblivious to the undercurrent threading through each shared look, each unspoken acknowledgement of desire. Her laughter rang like bells, fragile and untamed, breaking the monotony of their silent choreography. Night. They sat by the fire, the flames flickering across rugged faces and casting dancing shadows on weathered walls. Words were scarce, yet each syllable carried weight, a fragile admission of feeling that trembled in the spaces between them. "I didn't think I could feel again," the Baron murmured, voice low and rough, nearly lost beneath the crackle of flames. She nodded, tears catching the firelight like dew on dry grass, an acknowledgement of truth without need for elaboration. Even in silence, the air around them pulsed with forbidden tension, a taut cord strung between longing and restraint. He admired her, not for the curves of her body, nor the warmth of her touch, but for the strength that hid beneath the surface, the courage of a woman who had endured storms and survived, who protected her daughter with fierce, quiet ferocity. She, in turn, recognized his solitude, the chasm of age, wealth, and moral code separating them. Yet in the spaces where it faltered, a fragile connection had begun to take root, but the peace was fragile. From beyond the hills, threats stirred like a distant storm. A rival rancher, greedy and unscrupulous, sought to claim her daughter's future, his intentions dark and unrelenting. His presence loomed like a shadow over the ranch, a reminder that safety and trust were temporary, precarious things. The tension tightened, coiling in their chests as desire and fear collided in urgent pulses. Each heartbeat was a warning. The fire they had begun to kindle might consume them, yet the pull between them was impossible to resist. The night deepened, carrying the scent of wood smoke, dust, and distant rain. Flames flickered low, casting an intimate glow that illuminated the raw honesty in their eyes. Their daughter slept, small and unknowing, a fragile tether to innocence that made every stolen glance, every unspoken thought, more dangerous, more precious. The chapter closed on a tableau of longing and suspense, the Baron and the woman seated side by side, shadows stretching across the floor, firelight flickering over faces taut with emotion. The ranch, silent, but for the crackle of embers, held its breath with them, waiting. Outside, the wind whispered through the plains, carrying the promise of confrontation, the threat of betrayal, and the inevitability of revelation. Their feelings remained tangled and forbidden, a coil of desire, fear, and fragile trust, poised on the edge of ignition. The dawn broke gently, spilling gold across the scarred plains, illuminating the ranch in soft, forgiving light. The barn, The fences, the weathered corral, all stood battered yet unbowed, as if the land itself bore witness to survival. The air smelled of sage and damp earth, the faint tang of rain lingering from the storm that had passed, carrying a fragile promise of renewal. She and her daughter stepped into the pale light, the child's small hand slipping into hers with quiet trust. The Baron watched from the porch, his silhouette carved in the morning glow, scars etched into skin and soul alike. Silence hung between them like morning mist, heavy but cleansing, tension tempered by shared trials and tentative hope. The rancher approached from the ridge, eyes greedy, expecting fear, confrontation, a chance to impose his will. But he met only resolve. The Baron stood tall, shoulders squared, a presence that radiated silent authority and strength, born of hardship. Each scar on his hands and face spoke volumes, a map of battles won, threats endured, and the moral code that defined him. No words were needed to communicate the warning. This land, this family, would not yield. The woman drew her daughter close, shoulders firm, chin lifted. Courage radiated from her every movement, the quiet strength that had carried them through storms, threats, and betrayal. She showed her child that fear could be met with bravery, that survival was not just endurance, but defiance. The rival paused, hesitation flickering across his face, then faltered entirely when the Baron stepped forward, the space between them charged, unyielding. The words came low, measured, carrying the weight of everything they had endured. "She's ours," the Baron said simply, voice cutting through the morning air. "Not yours, not mine. Ours." The dust settled like powdered gold across the corral. The sun climbed higher, gilding fences, roof lines, and the worn earth beneath their boots. The daughter, unburdened by threats or fear, ran toward the open plains, laughter spilling across the horizon, a sound unshackled, pure, untethered. The wind lifted her hair, carried her joy like a song across the wide, forgiving land. She finally allowed herself a moment of rest, leaning against the Baron's shoulder, the warmth of his presence a solid anchor. A touch, simple and deliberate, passed between them, a promise of safety, of trust, of love that had been hard-won and tempered in the fires of adversity. They breathed together, the quiet intimacy of shared victory grounding them, tethering their hearts in ways words could never achieve. The rival retreated, the threat dissolved into the morning haze, leaving only silence, vast and unbroken. Around them, the ranch breathed anew, sun-sparked dust dancing in golden shafts, the corral gates creaking gently as if whispering approval. Nature itself seemed to exhale, granting absolution to those who had endured, persevered, and dared to hope. 3 figures remained on the porch, silhouetted against the endless plains, mother, child, and Baron. Their hearts, once fractured, now beat in quiet sync, a rhythm of trust and shared strength. Shadows stretched long behind them, mingling with light, creating a tableau of resilience, survival, and fragile peace. The wind lifted, carrying the scent of sage, dry earth, and new beginnings, whispering secrets of courage, redemption, and legacy. This was no ending, only the gentle arc of continuation. A dawn that promised not just survival, but growth, love, and a family forged from fire, tears, and unwavering will. The plains held them, the sun crowned them, and the quiet dawn heralded the first chapter of life reimagined. Hearts mended like old leather stitched with care, unbroken, ready to endure whatever horizon awaited.